Click that. There we go.
Okay. Thanks very much, guys, for joining. I'm Philip Denny. Before we start, we are having a slight technical issue, but we're going to work through that. Again, thank you for joining our webinar today. I am Philip Denny, President of US GovCert. I want to give you, before we start, I want to give you an overview of how we typically conduct these webinars. We have some topics that we want to cover, but we allow your questions to direct the flow of our discussion. So add your questions to the chat. We also have some poll questions that we would like for you to respond to. Okay. Again, I'm Philip Denny, President of US GovCert. We created the GRC tool, US GovCert, to help those organizations who are seeking certification or OSCs to securely manage the large volume of documents required on your certification journey. I believe this is the 10th in our CMMC series of webinars. You can go to our YouTube channel to see past webinars. Now, our goal is to share information with you regarding the direction that we believe the CMMC certification program is heading. As you know, the CMMC program officially began effectively on December 16th of last year. And the CMMC requirement is starting to show up in solicitations. A good example is the Army MAPS sources sought, which was due on February the 14th. MAPS is a consolidation of both ITES 3 and the Army, another large Army program that MAPS has a ceiling value of about 50 billion, and it goes for 10 years. Let's see here.
There's Steve's on.
Steve. And again, I am Philip Denny. And I want to introduce you to the panelists that have been here with us from the beginning. The first is Steve Palomero. Steve, with over 25 years of experience in the technical industry and a degree in computer science and mathematics from Purdue University. Steve is a seasoned professional. Over the past 5 years, he has become a leading authority on NIST 800-171 and CMMC compliance. He has collaborated with numerous organizations, helping them navigate the complex world of compliance and cybersecurity. Currently serving as channel partner manager for CMMC and the Fast Track program at Lifeline Data Centers. Steve specializes in leveraging virtualization technology to streamline and enhance the CMMC compliance process. And in this upcoming webinar, he will share valuable insights on how virtualization can revolutionize cybersecurity and compliance, offering a more secure digital future. Kelly is our next panelist is Kelly Kendall. Kelly is a service-disabled veteran and a Marine Corps veteran of the Marine Corps and the CEO and president of KNC Strategic Services. KNC is a cybersecurity service provider based in Carlsbad, California. They're an authorized C3PAO. I think at the time we wrote this, he was the 45th of 50 authorized C3PAOs. I think that number may have gone up a bit now. Kelly is a certified CMMC assessor with over 30 years leadership experience, both in the military and the corporate world. Kelly brings a unique blend of discipline, strategic thinking, and execution to cybersecurity management. His understanding of how to lead teams effectively translate into well-managed, well-executed cybersecurity programs for clients. Now, Chris, our third panelist. Um, Chris is CEO of Mercat Cyber, a firm dedicated to cybersecurity and the Department of Defense Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Framework. As an aeronautical and astronomical engineer who complemented his undergraduate work with a law degree, Chris finds the marriage of technology and regulatory policy fascinating. During his 3-decade career, Chris has held roles, including Senate policy analyst and chief technology officer for a cybersecurity firm. And he has obtained the highest level of certification possible through the Department of Defense CMMC program, including certified CMMC Assessor, certified CMMC Professional, and certified CMMC Instructor. He is currently among a small number of people in the world who can perform certified CMMC assessments. Chris has also spent decades as a technical writer. Aside from authoring hundreds of patent applications for highly technical inventions, Chris is the named inventor on numerous patents and has served as a technical writer for Nobel laureates, international thought leaders, and numerous universities. Among his accomplishments, Chris has been engaged by Microsoft to write their CMMC implementation. Finally, we have Robert Ashcroft. Robert is president of CMMC Solutions, a division of Corporate Visions LLC. CMMC Solutions is dedicated to preparing the defense industrial base for its cybersecurity challenges. He has some key patents to his name. His firm has experienced IT auditors and considerable cybersecurity knowledge, considerable cybersecurity knowledge. They understand the complexities and inheritance required to pass an assessment. He is also currently an adjunct professor of information security at Kutztown University. So one of the things that we want to have that we want to share with you is what we see as the change landscape, or if there is a change landscape in federal contracting. We know changes are taking place. We also know that small contractors, the bulk of the folks on our webinar today, are the ones who will most acutely feel any changes that the administration plans to implement. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to ask your questions and to share some knowledge with you, because all of the participants today are currently actively either helping companies in a role as a consultant or as an assessor, helping small companies make it through the process, through the certification program. So before we delve into more questions, I want to give the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and kind of tell you what they feel, what they see as the direction that the CMMC program is taking. So take it away, guys.
Okay, I'll start. I'm the A in the beginning, so I was always the first in class. I had to speak, so I might as well take it now. So 2025 is the initiation of CMMC. December 16th, it was put into law, which was Title 32 and the Title 48, quote unquote, expected Q2, which puts CMMC law into the contracts. The, I guess, big concern that I have within CMMC is a lot of the contractors are waiting, so to speak. They're understand the cost is fairly high for it. And so they're trying to look, do I want to do it? If what portion of the business is, but what we all see, that I know all the panel members we see, is that waiting is not a good idea, because the main issue is going to be in the certification and having enough people to be able to handle all these certifications. Right now, I know a couple are filled up for 2025. You have to wait to 2026. And the longer you wait, the quicker that's going to fill up. So that's kind of my big concern with it. What I'm trying to do at Kutztown University is prepare the students so that a lot of the people on here today will have a better population of new employees who will have a better understanding. I build not only CMMC, the 171 framework knowledge in, but I bring in the business knowledge. I want them to understand what business is. They actually work on real applications and CMMC, so they'll be better fit for you with them. Very good.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm Steve Polomara. Again, I'm Vice President over at Lifeline Data Centers over the CMMC Fast Track program. As Philip said, I've been working with companies now for about 8 years. And Bob, that's always been the case, is everybody's waiting and waiting and waiting, and they're all trying to time it, right? And at this stage, I'm very surprised that companies are still trying to time it. Because as Bob said, you've got Title 48 coming out sometime between now and June is the estimates that we've seen. And once that comes out, there's a 4-year period that it will absolutely start showing up in contracts. And the average time between the requirement showing up on a contract, an RFP being issued, and an RFP being rewarded is about 1 month. So if it's in a contract, it comes out to as RFP, it gets awarded 30 days later, and you can bid on it, but you cannot perform unless you're certified. Now, companies think that they'll be given a pass potentially, and that they'll be able to self-attest because there's a bottleneck, right? There's a backlog. A lot of companies are in this boat, so they're going to give us time. Don't think that's the case. So it is playing with fire. Been playing with fire for a while, but right now I think is that I've always thought 2025 has been the year that companies really need to buckle down and start moving forward.
Fantastic.
Thing I wanted to add too that's happening just this week is a lot of people have wondered what's going to happen to CMMC under the Trump administration. He's talked about cuts. He's talked about cuts at the Pentagon specifically. And our strong belief, and I think it was verified this week, is CMMC is not going to be cut, and we're not going to see any change to the program other than maybe it's going to go faster. And here's why. The primary author of CMMC went, and this was under the Trump administration, when it first came out, CMMC was written by Katie Arrington. And she was at the DoD and charged primarily with being the author of CMMC. She left the DoD, went out in the private sector, but was recently brought back in the CIO role for the DoD to be in charge of CMMC. So you've got somebody who wrote the regulations coming back to oversee the regulations. This is not something that's going to go away. We believe that if anything, we're going to hear some news about let's get this going faster.
One of the potential bottlenecks, even though there's lots of interest, the assessors still have to go through a rigorous training program. And I don't think you can crank out assessors overnight, even if there's a willingness of people to go through the program. You still can't become an assessor overnight. So you still have that as a bottleneck. And that probably is one of the reasons why you should want to expedite getting on a list of a consultant who would help you identify an assessor and to go through the process, because it isn't slowing down. I think they're bringing the Silicon Valley move fast and break things ethos to this process. It seems like one of the questions I had initially is if the government would, under the new administration, would slow up the process or change the process for certification, but this apparently is staying in place and it is accelerating. In terms, I know, Robert, you just indicated that you know of a couple of consultants who are already booked up for the entire year of 2025. What can the community, the vendor community, do to kind of help themselves? What can they do internally to prepare for consultants to come on board versus before they even get to the assessment part? How do they sanitize their environment to make it more to make their process more, I guess, easier? Is there anything that they can do?
Well, I want to bring up where I've run across several companies saying that, well, we brought someone in, we're all ready.
Okay.
And you really, they call it red teaming. You get a third party in there just to look at it. And for every single company I've done to where they had someone internal or they try to do it themselves, none of them were ready. Zero. The CMMC is just an odd duck. And Chris and I talk a lot about this, and Steve and Cohen and I with it. And there are just too many particulars with it. The policies, procedures, how they have to be defined and reflective, because there are 320 objectives that have to be met. And that is what the assessors from the C3PAO is really going to go in and concentrate on. You want to be able to give them a general idea how your company runs, but you really have to be specific within the objectives and also refer back to the policies and procedures that you are doing. And it's not just the policies procedure. Yes, I do it in this. They have to tell them exactly how, and then they should be able to take that and have you walk through the different procedures so that you can demonstrate that, yes, you're currently doing it. Chris, you want to, because you and I've talked about this a lot.
Yeah, we have. I can't emphasize enough that if you have not started down this path, you need to get started fast, because the average time of implementation is 9 months to a year. Most people think they're much farther than they are. I echo what Bob said, that the vast majority of people, actually, I don't think we've ever had a client come in and accurately know where they are. They're always overestimating. When you really get somebody with an assessor training to look at where you stand, it's usually, oh my gosh, we have a lot of work to do. So if you are thinking, I don't need to worry about this until I see it in a contract, that is not true, because you won't have 9 months to a year to get ready to bid on that contract. And some of them, as Philip said at the very beginning, some of the primes, including the Army, have already said, you need to show us today when you apply for this or when you respond to an RFP that you are either certified or you have a certification scheduled in the next few months, or don't even apply. Don't even bother submitting a bid. So that's where we are going and how long it's taking to get there. So I absolutely recommend get somebody on your team who's knowledgeable, train somebody internally, or find somebody who is on the CyberAB website. You can go to what's called the marketplace on the CyberAB website, and that's cyberab.org. Go to the marketplace there and find either a CCP or a CCA, because those are going to be your most trained individuals who understand CMMC, and they can help you in this process.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a question, Philip.
I was just gonna,
or Steve, you wanted to add a little bit? I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I did. I talk to like 15, 20 companies a week on this, and most of the time it's someone, the CIO or someone high up in the IT group, it's been handed off to leadership. Hey, we need to take care of CMMC. And the challenge there is that the IT piece, that's relatively straightforward. I mean, there's nuances, there's some challenges there. There's a few different paths you can go down, whether it's VDI, taking the endpoints out of scope, or hardening everything and all that stuff, right? The tough part's the part that Chris and Bob did, which is the policies, procedures, and those are the collection of evidence, all of the nuances wrapped around those pieces. And this is what you guys were saying, but that is where the IT group, that's out of their realm, right? They have compliance people sometimes, right? Or if they're doing ISO and those types of things. But CMMC, even the vendors they bring in, yeah, we can help you with GCC high or whatever the technology is. But as far as the policies, procedures, collections of evidence, it's getting way outside of our scope. So that getting to Chris's point, somebody that's knowledgeable about those controls and those objectives, CMMC, right? An RPO, somebody that has that knowledge base that's been there, done that, critical.
Okay.
There's Kelly.
Okay. Yeah, Kelly, I have a question for you. I think this is positioned well. Companies with GoDaddy, Microsoft Business Premium, and they say, can we achieve and sustain CMMC 2 levels 1 and 2 compliance if we remain fully on GoDaddy managed Microsoft 365, or is defederating email to standalone Microsoft 365 subscriptions necessary to ensure compliance?
I
It's
would
in the
say
Q&A if you want to reread it.
Yeah, that might help. I'm just on to there. Oh, I switched over, so I don't see it yet. So, but if I understand what you're saying, basically is, regardless of GoDaddy, Business Premium versus the 365 full E3, G3, G5 licenses, and then the GoDaddy aspect of it as well. Business Premium, I would not recommend. I do not think it would be in your best interest because of the amount of things that you don't get with it. The amount of things you need to be able to meet the requirements, you've got to have those enterprise licenses, those E3s plus some of the packages, or the E5 licenses, or G3, G5, to be able to meet all the requirements. I personally would not do it. I think it would be I'm trying to think of a polite way to put this. No.
Yeah, that was going to be mine too.
And let me add to that. Here's
Yeah.
the test. Is it FedRAMP authorized? Is your cloud service provider FedRAMP authorized? And we're talking about level 2 here. The question was, are we able to be on this platform at level 1 and 2 compliance? And if you're in the commercial cloud, which I believe Business Premium is,
Yes.
you are not going to be compliant because commercial cloud does not entirely have FedRAMP authorization. There are some parts of it that do not. So we have guided all of our clients to at least a GCC moderate enclave and GCC high if you're handling ITAR. ITAR is yet another restriction, which is you can't store the data anywhere overseas, and that is pretty much the GCC high platform is your only option. So if you're looking at Microsoft, you guys do need to get a consultant to help you. There are some sticky questions with how to be compliant, but I'm nearly certain every consultant, if they're educated on this, will tell you got to go up to GCC or level 2.
Yep.
Okay. I think Bob alluded to something earlier in his intro, which is self-certification. I think one of the reasons that DoD might have gone away from the NIST not gone away, but augmented the NIST 800-171 certification is because lots of vendors who performed the self-certification, it was actually discovered that they weren't that certified. So if you can speak to the fact that level 1 and level 2 can be self-certifying, but at the same time, they're still a lot more stricter than they were previously when you can simply claim you were self-certified. They actually potentially could come in and look at your environment and verify whether or not you are. So that's kind of the self-certification doesn't necessarily let you off the hook. You still, it might be in your interest to still engage with a consultant who can actually help you go through the fact that you are actually certified. So if you can speak to the need for that self-certification to be a real thing, as opposed
Philip,
to
that's a
claiming.
good point, because I was talking to somebody today that just said that, they gave themselves a score. They're looking for outside help, and they felt like they were auditing themselves, right, by self-certifying. So to bring in that third party, and I mean, these guys can speak to that, but that, interestingly enough, that's what companies feel like when you're self-certifying. You're like, do you meet this? Yes, 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 right?
Yes.
Yeah, they were at one of the conferences, Steve. There was one of the people from the DIP, and they said that most of the companies were doing like 90 to 110. And when they went in, and this was during the joint surveillance time, when they went in and then rescored them, they found the average score was 0. That's how off. It's not like it's 10 points or something like that. It's really off. And it's nothing, that majorly that they were offending about. They just don't know. I mean, doing assessing and auditing, I've been in it 20 years and you still learn. And it probably took me a good 3, 4, 5 years until I had my head straight on how to do it. And now these companies are trying to do it themselves off the whim without any really good backup education on it at all. It's you aren't doing anything grossly wrong or something. It's just a new process. We went through this with Sarbanes-Oxley. I remember 2004 or 5, and it was the same thing back then. Companies were trying to do their best, but they just didn't know. It was new to them, and we're running into the same thing here. So get somebody who really has a good background. Look for not just a certification. Look at their background. What have they been doing? What's their history on it? Not just the past year or two, but look at the past 5, 10 years. What have they been doing in helping? You want someone who also knows your vertical, to where I do pretty good with manufacturers, because when I was going to college, I was a machinist for Bethlehem Steel. I was a machinist for Knoll International. I was in manufacturing. I saw it, I understood it, I did it. So for manufacturing, I understand. Auditing, I audited, like Subaru, other auto part companies, et cetera. So they all had the CNC machines. There's various things they have to know about the warehousing aspects and stuff. So in that, your vertical does this person know your vertical on it? So that's kind of the second attribute. Kelly, you've
Hey
been a
guys,
little
yeah,
quiet.
perfect timing. I was just going to jump in here. So I want to clarify something, and one, because terminology is really important in here, and to make sure there's no confusion, seeing some in the chat as well. So there's no such thing as a self-certification. There's only a certification, which is the third-party certification. There is a self-attestment, I can't say it today apparently, but guys will know what I mean, the self-attestations. So you have a self-assessment at level 1 that's going to be required of everybody. Then there will be a level 2 self-assessment that you put into the SPRS system. The likelihood of that being on a contract requirement is extremely slim. I think the estimates were around 1,500 companies out of the 300 and many more than that number that the DoD puts out. So the self-assessment option at level 2 really isn't an option. It's only going to be, it's being held by the DoD We wanted it gone. They said, nope, we want to keep it in. We just want to have that as an option. So the likelihood that it's going to come into play is pretty slim. So level 2 ultimately is only third-party certification by an authorized C3PO. Level 1, self-assessment, and then you put the attestation, got it right, into SPRS, and good to go. Just want to make sure I got that clarified for everyone.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I saw that up
Thanks.
in there. Thank you for.
I want to also speak briefly to the self-attestation. I also recommend that you get help on that. And here's why. The self-attestations were the way that the DoD first went when DFAR 7012 came out. And they realized after the fact that was a mistake, and that's why CMMC was born. Self-attestations, the vast majority of the companies they found with 5 different Inspector General reports, the DoD determined these companies are not self-attesting correctly. They're saying there's some score, and it's, as Bob pointed out, it's hundreds of points lower sometimes. So self-attestations, they started to throw the book at the people that were doing that and just referred them over to the Department of Justice, because that is false claims. That is what's also called Lincoln's Law. If you are telling the government, and the person who is signing this must be a corporate executive, if that corporate executive is attesting to the federal government that I am doing this and they're really not, they've just gotten themselves in a world of trouble, including fines and even jail time are at stake. So given how much is at stake, we absolutely recommend you get some help on your self-attestations too. It's never going to be as expensive as a level 2 assessment, but just get somebody to make sure you're not going to end up paying millions of dollars in fines because you didn't know what you were signing.
There's a question in the chat. What percentage of subcontractors do you estimate will be adequate with level 1? And that's a loaded question, because I think what I would have said back in January, what I say now, are 2 different numbers with it, but I want to hear what you all have to say.
I was just typing a response to that, and it's going to be minimal. And what I mean by that is, if you have no CUI, okay, level 1. And since we're talking subcontractor specifically, if you don't have, I'll try to use polite terms, a pushy prime telling you what you have to do and when you have to do it, which is what's happening predominantly, then you could be fine with level 1. So it's not just a matter of the CUI aspect. When we're talking subcontractors, it's all about what your primes are telling you have to do, because they have the power, because you want to keep doing business with them. And that's happened a lot. So there's a lot of primes telling their subs, you have to have level 2 by. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be a massive amount, unless they can either push back a lot or just prove, hey, there's no CUI in this. So
Hey,
stop
Kelly,
bothering me.
don't you think part of it is the ability to be able to properly, I don't want to call it control your prime, but partner with your prime to get them to only send you what you need, right? Because that's a lot of it. If they're sending you CUI, but you don't need to see it, then just make sure they don't send you the CUI, right?
Yeah.
That's
In
So-
theory, yeah, but seeing how a lot of the primes are actually acting, I mean, even way before that, they're already covering their own tails, understandably, and telling their subs, you have to have this in case we send you CUI. So they're more taking that approach of, way advanced of, hey, you're doing business with us, so you need to have level 2. I've seen that a lot with a lot of clients that we've done consulting with, and heard many horror stories of that happening as well with major primes. I don't know about some of the more of the, mid-level primes, so to speak, but all the big primes are pushing that hard. Not
Yeah, I
surprised.
think that's the other point to make on this whole Title 48 and Q2, Q3 rollout, 4-year rollout. It's a moot point if your prime says you have to be level 2, right? Moot point. So if you're working with the prime and they tell you have to be level 2, then it doesn't matter what's on the contract or how long it takes to start showing up.
And here's the other way I like to look at this. Those of you who are out there thinking, is it worth it to me? Hear what we're saying here. primes are telling their subcontractors, go get certified, and some of them are not going to do it. If you were to go get certified now and you previously couldn't compete, maybe didn't think you could get into a prime and offer services to them, if you go get certified, I know your chances just went up, because the primes are going around and asking, where are you subcontractors in your CMMC certification? And those that are not where they need them to be, they're looking for somebody else. It could have been a 30-year relationship that they've been working with that subcontractor, but it is to the detriment of the prime. They will lose the contract if any one of their subs is not certified. So they're walking away. I'm sorry that 30 years we had a great relationship, but I can't work with you anymore. You're not certified.
That's fantastic. Kelly, thanks for clarifying the.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a thing about the cost. And one person said that it's about $30,000 in prep, and about third party, about 50,000. It's a big, hurdle for people. And that's where, it is what it is. But there's also, as the CMMC comes in play with Title 48, there's what they call the indirect expense, where you can expense within your contracts the cost of it. I know there's a ceiling on how much you can do, but I think that's 96,000 if I remember correctly. If it's not right, sorry about that. But you have to work with the contract manager on what's allowable as far as the expense. I think look at the number of contracts, et cetera, that you're working with. So they do have, it's a delayed path, but there is a way to get the compensation. And from my understanding and talking with some of the people in the contract arena, is that people say, well, if I go and add this cost, my RFP, I'll never get anything because I'm going to have $20,000, $30,000 over on a bid, and they'll see someone else with that less. So how am I going to win work? Well, that expense of, let's say, that 20, 30,000 that you would put in indirect will show up separately, and your true estimate of cost of what you're putting in will be on a separate line, and the contract managers will be able to see that. And again, since this is all new, everyone's going through it. It's, I think there's going to be a lot of questions and answers and everything that have to be done to get this done. But what do you think about the cost of that 30,000 prep and 50,000 for the C3PAO?
That's a good deal. I think we're seeing higher than that on average.
Yeah, I can tell you from what we have closed, what we've quoted, and what we've heard back every time we talk to any kind of a prospective assessment client, we're hearing what they're hearing out there. And 30,000 for prep, I think it really depends because of how long and how much you need to do. I've seen it be 15 to 50 and plus. On the assessment side, though, the costs that we quote and say, if it's a small assessment scope, which is how we base our pricing, it tends to be in the 40 to 55 range right now. If it's a more medium scope, it's in the 55 to 75. If it's large scope, which I always make stupid jokes, but it's like Lockheed Martin's not coming to us asking for us to do their assessment. But if it was a large scope like that, you're going to be in the 75 to 100,000 plus range. And that seems to be pretty common, but that, yeah, I can tell that.
You don't think the primes will beat them up? You don't think the primes will beat them up to get that price down?
They haven't so far. Wouldn't surprise me though. Yeah, if they were.
Yeah, the moniker
use
of
their
I
power.
did them. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. Just what I've seen kind of inside a little bit what happens with it, but it's definitely higher than a small and medium would be. There's more there. I was up in the prime, and the one division had 600 applications alone at BSS, and I think 200 were in scope. And well, that's a lot for the C3PA to be able to go to. There is one comment about And he said, sorry to be blunt, I deal with this daily. It's a non-negotiable at any prime level. Sub, anything, if you want to work with DoD, you have to be CMMC level 2. And I hear that, where people say, yeah, I'm a 1 now, but if CMMC level 2 comes up, I need to be able to bid on it to stay in the DoD work. Do you feel that's true?
Not necessarily. I mean, I guess you could say spirit of law versus the actual law, so to speak, is level 1 is sufficient if you're not dealing with a CUI contract. So from the letter of the law, no, not really.
Right.
But from spirit of law perspective, I guess you'd say, yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying is if you really want to have a chance to compete on contracts and not have to worry about it and go after stuff that's going to be higher value, more important, whatever, level 2, yeah, you know, I definitely understand where Juan's coming from on that. You know, technically no, but in reality, yeah, probably majority of the time you want to be level 2 unless you're just absolutely never do with CUI and don't want to.
If you perhaps though are a maintenance company or doing janitorial work for buildings or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And you might not want to go after that. Well, one question that we briefly touched on recently, right now, the DoD is kind of leading the charge, but I gathered from the group that you believe that this requirement will soon find its way to the civilian agencies. And what do you think about that in terms of when it might occur?
The one gentleman brought up about DOE, and DOE called me in, and I sat down with them. They wanted to know about 171. DOE is an 853 based entity, but they saw real quick that that's way too heavy for all their contractors. And they said, with what they're doing over in DoD land, do you think that would be good for us? And I went through and explained the whole layout of what they're doing, et cetera. And then I heard actually 2024 that probably 2026, 2027, they'll be in the 171 land too.
Okay.
And I think that's a good point, Bob, is that I've had several companies talk to me about that type of scenario where it starts to bleed into other federal agencies. And the key is it's years, not months, right? It's going to be a ways out. It's going to go quicker than CMMC went because they laid the groundwork, but it's not going to happen at the speed of light.
Yeah. What have you heard, Chris?
So I think DOE is going to be sooner rather than later. And part of that was even hinted at in an article today that appeared regarding, hey, don't make cuts to the DoD that impact our research institutions. And the reason they said that is because they are the ones that are providing a lot of technology just to keep our military forces on track and not getting, old and behind the times. I subscribe to a couple of publications that are kind of engineered publications, but man, every day China's got some kind of a headline of what they're able to accomplish over there that is either at our level, if not farther, faster, something. And we do need researchers. We do need people who are spending the money in there trying to make sure we're staying up to date and if not superior. So that article was arguing that, yes, we need the money to continue to flow from the DoD to these universities to make sure that they're doing the research, but that also speaks to universities that are doing this research need to make sure that data stays in the university.
Right. Yep.
And that is our problem. Our F-22 and F-35 are on Chinese tarmacs because we have data leaks. We have problems. We don't know how we, back in the day, they went back to Boeing and Lockheed and said, how does this happen? And they don't know. It's the mom and pop subcontractors that don't have an IT department, that don't have a budget. And so that's why we're here. That's why the DoD said we've got to do something.
Right. Steve, there's something here I want you to talk about only because I know with what Lifeline's dealing with, and they're asking about, I'm M365 user, go to GCC high, etc. But there's something that I know in Lifeline that you offer kind of a stepping stone for
Yeah,
them.
if I did see that question, well, a couple things there. You know, if you're going to GCC or GCC high, right, from commercial, it's the first question is, are you moving everybody over, or is it an enclave? And if it's an enclave, then you're going to do a subdomain, right? And it's just a fresh install. You're not migrating anything over. It's easier. If you're moving the whole company, it's a migration. Little tougher, costs a little bit more money to do, takes a little bit more time. And so, Bob, by stepping stone, what are you referring to there?
XQ. As far as, yeah, if they're in like Microsoft Enterprise, and then there's other
right.
options,
You can,
you know.
You're talking about going to a commercial with encryption, right? Versus,
Yes, right.
Yeah. That's also an option, is to get a third-party tool to keep your commercial with encrypted vault and encrypted email.
Okay, fantastic.
I see a question about MSPs. I think that's a good subject to bring up.
Yeah,
And
please.
let's talk about external service providers in general. The final rule backed off, and a lot of people sighed, but I mean, sighs of relief that, oh, good, my MSP doesn't have to go get certified. But here's what it really came down to. If your MSP or external service provider is handling some kind of security function, they are either going to be in that assessment with you, and they better have a really good shared responsibility matrix, or they need to be assessed. So although it said you don't have to go get assessed, if their business model is that they have more than one client or a number of clients in the government space, they probably still want to go get assessed, because otherwise they're going to be spending most of their time in these assessments. They are going to have to walk through all the controls that they do and have the assessor ask them, how are you doing this? Let me see verification of that. Whereas if you go through the certification as an MSP, for example, then you have at least a presumption that this was done correctly, and the assessor can still ask, but it most of the time is going to get you out of sitting through that whole assessment.
Right.
But I'll say a cautionary tale too. If your MSP doesn't know what 171 is or what CMMC is, run. You're not gonna pass your
Or how to
exam.
spell CMMC.
Yep.
Yeah, we're the one thing we're doing is we're setting up a lot of MSPs in our enclave environment, and so they're loading their ticketing system, MRR, right? So all of their tools in the enclave, and they're supporting out of the enclave.
Yeah.
So-
I wanted Kelly to talk about SRM, that shared responsibility matrix, how you looked at it. He's a C3 PAO, okay? And I want from him to tell everyone here how important that is and the details of that and what you're looking for in that.
It's extremely critical, just like Chris said. When you have an MSP, an MSSP, or as we call them, ESPs in the CMMC space, and they're doing anything for you, or you have a cloud service provider, think of a Microsoft, an AWS, Google, they all have shared responsibility matrices. And what they convey is what you can inherit, what you have to do to fulfill your responsibility. So is it fully inherited from them, or is there some kind of a shared responsibility, literally? So Microsoft will do this, but to finish and make it fully compliant, I have to do X. And that's what's getting conveyed. For an MSP, it's saying, we're doing this for you. You still have to do this part to make that control fully met. But the MSP is doing this, which means you can inherit that, or that portion of partial inheritance from them. So that, as an assessor, is one of the most critical artifacts we look at. And I can tell you this verbatim from an assessment I was just recently on. The minute we knew that there was an MSP, our first question was, do they have an SRM? Who are they? What do they do? And we jumped right into it. And so we had to get that immediately, because we needed to understand what was going to be their responsibility, because that determined so much of the assessment. Who do we need to talk to? How much do we need to talk to the MSP? How much time do we need from them? How do we schedule it? Do we need to have them every day? So it's a very, very critical artifact.
Earlier in the call, Chris mentioned the potential penalties that can be assessed if you, falsely claim that you need the assessment. That's going to be assessed against the prime. However, it seems reasonable that you should expect the primes to pass part of that, if not the entire thing, down to whatever sub cost of violations or they can trace any kind of a breach to. Is that a fair statement in terms of the primes passing the full weight of any financial penalties through?
If it's caused by the subcontractor, I think that's probably in the contract, but also that's how the legal framework works. If the subcontractor makes the attestation and it's false, the DOD, again, refers it to the Department of Justice, DOJ, says, who made this attestation? Oh, that's Bob over at, ABC Parts. And Bob is the one who's going to have to respond to their inquiry.
So does the prime have an obligation to validate the attestation that their sub make, or they can just assume it's truthful? That's not.
Oh, they can't assume anything.
Okay.
Absolutely not. No, that's part of the thing. With the prime, I still get calls from them about they're going up with because of the work I did there for 3 years. They come back and they say, you remember this, that, and we have this other person come in. Are we missing anything? They still come back. And yeah, because they know they're responsible. It's a flow down, not a flow up, a flow down. Their responsibility, and they have to make sure everybody underneath is one, level 2 certified if they're providing a level 2 product.
Okay.
With it, maybe a level 1. That's the other thing. The contracts aren't just blatantly just all level 2. There are sections and everything that will signify the level in it.
So then, if you are a prime and you are trying to assess one of your subs attestation that they are at level 1, what do you do besides take their word for it if they're self-certified? I mean, what do you suggest they do?
Screenshot. What I would do is ask for a screenshot of their entry into SPRS, which is really the only way that a prime can verify. When it comes to the CMMC Level 2 certification, they'll get this nice, pretty looking snazzy PDF file that we create for the actual certification. But at level 1, that's all they can do, because the primes have no access to SPRS. They can't go in there and verify.
No.
So you have to rely, and that's ultimately the easiest way to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, we have seen increasingly detailed questions coming from the primes to the subcontractors, where I've seen 15, 20 page questionnaires. Hey, I need you to fill this out so we understand where you are and get it back to us if you want to do business.
Questionnaires from hell.
Yep. And we're seeing them because they're like, I don't know, am I doing this stuff? So they're handing it over to the consultants. Can you help me with this?
Okay.
I've seen 10 pagers for a level 1. They just want to walk through all the steps. What are you doing with, reporting? How are you tracking this, et cetera?
Yep.
So
Buyer beware.
Are there any questions that, based upon your current experience in both consulting and assessing, that you think that organizations seeking certification need to be aware of? Any open issues in your mind? Anything that was
that's a loaded question. It's not just one or two, and there's a whole host. And first thing that always do is try to figure out what their business is and how complex is it. Because you go with somebody who's just providing heads. That's a lot similar, you know, a lot different than someone who has a manufacturing making widgets with it. And then they have engineers, et cetera. So you really have to look at the company and provide the guidance accordingly on it.
I would be extremely wary if I'm an OSC, organization seeking certification, extremely wary of who is knocking on your door, offering their services and saying, let me help you with CMMC, because the word is out. CMMC is the law of the land. There are a whole lot of snakes out there that are saying, I can help you. And most of them should not be in this business. They're there because they see an opportunity to make some money. Tragically, we've seen, and we've had some clients come in the door that paid a lot of money for somebody else to supposedly help them down this path, and they wasted their money. So to make sure you're dealing with somebody who knows what they're doing, ask them what kind of training they've had from the DoD. All the assessors and CCPs must go through DoD training, and then they get listed on the marketplace. So you can check to see, are these people that want to help me with XYZ service, or do they even know what they're talking about? Because if they really want to be in this space, they go through the DoD training and get a CCP or CCA.
Yeah, good question at the end. Is DoD marking CUI appropriately? And it's not only that, is the prime in their paperwork handing you everything marked appropriately, and probably, you know, and I think what Kelly said was it's getting better, but I see more offense from the primes where it's easier for them just to mark the whole thing CUI than what you see coming out of DoD. And I'm working with several on that who are running into that, because then with their subs, and if the contracts mark CUI everything through, but they have items that really aren't, but the contract says it, then they have a bunch of other subs that are now coming into scope with it. But I think what Kelly said, it will be getting better with it, especially when Title 48 comes in. They'll have to be a lot more selective in what and how they're marketing, and they're getting education on it too.
So one of the things what I'm hearing is that when you're approached by a consultant, you should first verify through the Cyber AB whether or not they're registered under Cyber AB, and then ask them, will the certifications that they have and the currency of their certifications be listed on the Cyber AB?
Yes, and I'm going to put a long link
yes,
that gets you straight to the marketplace. But you'll see it's cyberab.org. Poke around there. You can learn a little bit about CMMC, who the various players are. But on this marketplace specifically, look up the company or the person you're dealing with and make sure they appear there somewhere. RPs are registered practitioners. They have kind of what I would call a paralegal level of knowledge of CMMC. CCPs, certified CMMC professionals, and CCAs, certified CMMC assessors, are the highest levels. Assessors are the highest, and even further, I'm an instructor as well. So look for somebody who's got CCP, CCA, if not instructor, to have the best knowledge out there.
and especially if they're one of the RPOs, you know, and I think Chris and I share a very strong opinion on this. There's RPOs that are out there that are consulting organizations, but if they don't have CCP, at least one CCP or ideally CCA on staff, personally, I would avoid them, because just like Chris said, that CCP designation, certified, you have to sit for the exam, high stakes, have to pass. It's so much more rigorous and so much more information than anything that the quote unquote consulting side goes through. I think it should have been the baseline certification for all sides. They didn't go that way, but yeah, couldn't echo that more.
Yeah, one thing up on the AB with that, a lot of people are going through that. I don't know what you want to call it, recertification, background check, whatever. And I'm kind of in that where I went in, filled my stuff, and it's not showing back up. And I went up and talked to Mike Snyder, John Haney about it, and they said, Oh, it takes about 4 months or so for it.
Okay.
Yeah, it kind of ridiculous, but it's out of their hands. So
Sure.
some of the people, you know, with it. So do your in-depth. If someone says they're a CCP, CCA, or whatever, not up on the marketplace, do a little more digging with them and ask them if they're going through that recertification.
I'm glad you brought that
So-
up. One of the things, we have another assessor here, and he's also a certified instructor. He's in the audience, Jim Meinke, a good friend of mine. He brought up, and I should point out that one of the things that could be happening if they're not listed is they did not pass their tier 3 yet. And that is a critical
Yeah,
distinction.
right.
Jim,
Yeah.
unfortunately, was taken down off of the marketplace despite having years of experience in the military, years of experience in this industry, and was waiting in this ridiculous line that is formed now
Yes.
that's longer than 6 months for his tier 3 to get through.
Right.
We don't
Exactly.
understand why it takes that long, but they took people off the marketplace that are still waiting for that background check to go through. So there are some exceptions to the general rule I gave earlier. So ignore that general rule. There are some people out there who very much deserve to be on the marketplace, but for whatever reason, they got backlogged with this tier 3 check.
Right.
So-
And yeah, I was
Go
one,
ahead.
I'm one, and I'm still waiting. I was on for a while, and all of a sudden I went back. I wonder what happened with this. And John says, "Up, you're in line." So I'm sorry. I guess we're a little over time, Phil. Sorry
Yeah, we're
about that.
slightly over time. I wanted to let the audience know that we're going to put the contact information for Chris, Kelly, Steve, and Robert in an email and send out to everyone. And again, the webinar, we're going to put it on the YouTube, on our YouTube site, channel, as soon as we clean it up. So again, thank everyone for participating. And I think I can get some bio and some other information from the panelists so that I could also send out to the attendees at the same time. So these guys have tons and tons and tons of experience in this field. So you feel free to reach out to any of them to help you on your certification journey. And again, thank you very much. And we're going to do this again in about 4 weeks. So you guys have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Take care.
Yep.